The HOA president didn't just fine me $5,000 for my so-called ugly garden. She secretly poisoned my dying wife's favorite roses, tried to steal my $750,000 inheritance, and later attempted to burn down the very place where my wife's ashes rested. But the next day, when federal archaeologists declared that same garden a historic landmark valued at $500,000, I made sure her entire criminal operation came crashing down in the most public and complete way possible. Picture this. My wife, Sarah, was dying of cancer, holding my trembling hands in that sterile hospital room. The smell of antiseptic couldn't hide her fear as she whispered her final wish. Restore grandmother's garden, Marcus. Promise me. Mix my ashes with the soil where love grew for generations. 8 months later, after Sarah was gone, Delilah Thornfield, the HOA president, stood at my door and sneered, "Dead people don't need gardens, Marcus. Time to face reality and sell." What she didn't know was that Sarah's cremated remains were already quietly nourishing those sacred roses, and I was about to turn her greed into a federal crime. Sarah wasn't just my soulmate. She was brilliant. Even as cancer weakened her, she spent hours researching our property's history and discovered something extraordinary. My grandmother Rosalind hadn't simply left me a house and a garden. She had created a legal trap worth $750,000. One afternoon, Sarah showed me yellow documents and whispered that the garden had to remain intact as a living memorial in order to unlock a $750,000 trust fund. She knew someone would try to take it. That someone was Delilah Thornfield. Delilah had been bitter for 8 years, ever since grandmother's will left the house to Sarah instead of her. Sarah had cared for the elderly woman in her final years. Delilah had only seen dollar signs. When Sarah inherited the property, Delilah's friendly mask fell away, revealing a calculating predator. Behind her perfect smile, she ran a shadow empire through layered LLCs. She had systematically targeted the street's original homeowners, elderly widows, veterans, anyone vulnerable. Surprise inspections, invented violations, escalating fines, utility shutoffs, tax reassessments, then lowball rescue offers through shell companies. She wasn't just an HOA president. She was running a sophisticated property theft scheme projected to net over $12 million in luxury townhouse development. Sarah's death gave Delilah her perfect opening. The day after the funeral, while I was still numb, she appeared with fake tears and a business card, cooing that Sarah wouldn't want me struggling alone in such a big house. What she didn't say was that she was the hidden buyer. Then the psychological warfare began. Anonymous calls to Adult Protective Services, whispers among neighbors about my unhealthy grief, suggestions that I was unstable and dangerous. Next came the garden sabotage. Sarah's irreplaceable heritage roses, carefully researched and planted for the memorial, withered overnight for what Delilah called an accidental herbicide overspray during a community beautification project she personally supervised. Standing in that poisoned garden, touching the brown edges of petals that had bloomed for Sarah just weeks earlier, I felt something break inside me. This wasn't vandalism. It was desecration of the sacred ground where my wife's ashes had been mixed with soil that had nurtured love across generations. Then the $5,000 fine arrived, perfectly timed. 30 days to correct the violations or face legal action, with the deadline landing exactly on Sarah's death anniversary. Delilah's cruelty was surgical. But kneeling in that damaged garden, breathing the faint lavender that still clung to the air, I decided to fight back. Sarah had left me more than grief and a promise. She had left me the tools. I just didn't realize yet that I was about to expose a criminal conspiracy that would make national headlines. The attacks kept coming. Delilah declared Sarah's River Rock Memorial Stone a violation of the no religious displays policy. The wind chimes, Sarah's gentle melody that had comforted me every morning, were deemed a noise ordinance breach. They were cut down overnight, leaving jagged metal edges. When I protested that this was my wife's grave, Delilah laughed and said cremated remains didn't belong in residential gardens. It was a health code violation. Time to let go, she told me. That night, I couldn't sleep. By morning, the chimes were gone. The memorial stone moved for compliance. Grief turned into cold determination. I started asking questions. The sweet widow next door, Eleanor Vance, told me over tea how Delilah had buried her in citations until she couldn't pay, then helped her move to assisted living. Right after an investment company bought her house at 60% of market value. Delilah had recommended the buyer. The pattern repeated across the street. Vulnerable owners, manufactured violations, forced sales to the same network of LLCs. I dug into property records until my eyes burned. The trail led back to Delilah. Then I found Sarah's hidden research notes tucked behind grandmother's jewelry box. Even while fighting cancer, Sarah had been quietly building a case against the woman who smiled at her funeral. Her final note read, "If you're reading this, something's happened to me, and Delilah is making her move." The garden preservation requirement isn't just grandmother's whim. It's legal protection. The trust can fund defense, but only if you keep the memorial intact. I've documented, had conversations. Don't let her steal what 3 generations built with love. Sarah's words hit like ice water. My brilliant wife had been one step ahead the whole time. That knowledge changed everything. Delilah escalated. Anonymous tips flooded agencies, adult protective services, the IRS, credit bureaus, the mortgage company, utility providers, even the health department claiming unsanitary burial practices. Inspectors photographed Sarah's memorial like a crime scene. Then came the petition questioning my mental fitness as trustee of the $750,000 estate, claiming my garden obsession and talking to my dead wife proved I was unfit. The plan was to force a court-ordered sale, with proceeds managed by a qualified trustee who would surely sell to developers. But Sarah had taught me to document everything. I had recordings of Delilah's cruelty, hours of calculated fake concern. I contacted Sarah's oncology team. Her doctor wrote a letter affirming that my memorial rituals were healthy grief processing, not mental illness. Neighbors who had been fed lies about me began to learn the truth. Eleanor organized quiet support. Public sympathy shifted when an investigative reporter published the story. HOA President Harris's grieving widower, Memorial Garden becomes battleground for property theft. Then came the turning point. The city's elderly archivist called with excitement. My grandmother hadn't just been a gardener. She had been the town's first female botanist. The garden contained original specimens from the 1887 town founder's estate, some genetically unique. University researchers confirmed it. 3 plant varieties thought extinct for 50 years were alive here. The garden qualified for the National Register of Historic Places. Federal protection would override every local rule and HOA restriction. Delilah tried one last desperate move, an adverse possession claim, fabricating 10 years of maintenance on the boundary area that included Sarah's ashes. Health officials arrived, demanding proof the remains were legally interred. I stood in my kitchen, holding crematorium papers while they photographed the garden like evidence of a crime. That's when I hired a private investigator. Within days, he uncovered 15 properties sold below market value to Delilah's LLC network, a coordinated elderly abuse operation involving corrupt mortgage brokers and assessors. The media picked up the broader story. Public outrage grew. Donations poured in for legal fees. Civil rights complaints, emotional distress lawsuits, and criminal fraud filings created a legal tsunami. Then came the discovery that changed everything. Ground-penetrating radar showed foundation ruins beneath Sarah's roses, stone and mortar consistent with the 1887 homestead. The garden sat directly on the original town founder's site. Federal law kicked in immediately. The property became a controlled archaeological zone. Every HOA citation, every fine, every threat was nullified. County officials arrived with apologies. State regulators withdrew everything. Sarah's final hidden letter, found in grandmother's jewelry box, explained it all. She had known the land held secrets deeper than sentiment. The preservation clause wasn't just about beauty. It was designed to catch anyone trying to destroy the site for profit. Federal investigators revealed the full scope, a fraud ring involving mortgage brokers, probate attorneys, developers. RICO charges followed. Then the arson attempt. Security cameras caught Delilah's hired torch pouring gasoline around the memorial at 2:47 a.m. Federal agents swarmed before he could light the match. The plot included tampering with the home's gas line, attempted murder. Domestic terrorism charges were added for targeting a federally protected site. Delilah's empire collapsed. She faced 27 years in federal prison after pleading guilty to conspiracy, arson, bribery, fraud, and interference with an archaeological site. 15 co-conspirators received sentences from 5 to 12 years. Assets worth over $50 million were seized and used to compensate victims. Her real estate license was revoked nationwide. 6 months later, the garden is now a living memorial and research site. Federal historic landmark status brought 50,000 visitors a year, generating millions in tourism revenue that fund schools, senior centers, and veteran programs. Extinct plants were propagated from seeds preserved in the soil Sarah's ashes helped protect. Scientific papers cite the site as a conservation miracle. UNESCO World Heritage designation placed it alongside the world's most irreplaceable places. Sarah's love didn't just preserve our story. It preserved history itself. The bronze plaque beside the memorial fountain reads simply, "Love grows eternal. Sarah and Marcus forever." And every evening, when a lavender scent drifts through the air and children plant heritage seeds nearby, I feel her presence stronger than ever. Love won everything.